this morning, I'll play the video concerned with justice.
And I'm going to share my screen for the folks on Zoom so that you see the video too. I think we have to optimize the sound. Okay.
Well-practiced disciples also join the Spirit in establishing justice for those who have been cast aside and...
Sorry, I've got calls coming in. Where's the volume? Here we go. This.
Well-practiced disciples also join the Spirit in establishing justice for those who have been cast aside and kept out by the empires and powers of our world. When George Floyd was murdered this summer right on our doorstep, he became another name in a long list of Black men and women who have been brutally killed by police. The global uprising that started in the streets of Minneapolis is unlike anything most of us have seen in our lifetimes. And I believe it is the activity of the Holy Spirit in the world. So joining the Spirit's work for justice and becoming beloved community will look like a comprehensive strategy for every faith community to engage in the work of learning, praying, and acting to dismantle systemic racism in our church and to join and support where that work is happening in the world. We are building our approach to that work even now, and I will soon be asking every single faith community in our diocese to take part in that work. Joining the Spirit's work of justice will also look like recognizing fully Minnesota's rapidly changing demographics and developing an intentional plan to nurture and grow our vibrant multicultural faith communities. And it will require us to continue to account for our ongoing complicity in the decimation of indigenous cultures and receive again the gifts of Minnesota's first people and first Episcopalians. This morning, we're being asked the question, will you join the ways the Spirit is bringing about new justice?
All right. I need to stop the video and come back here.
All right, so that is our bishop's call to prioritize justice, becoming the beloved community. And that will guide our conversation this morning for our faith forum. So now I'd like each of the Circle of the Beloved Fellows to introduce themselves. And I've got a number of questions that I've posed to our young adults to answer. So I'll just go through these and then remind you as the conversation unfolds. So please tell us your name and what are your preferred pronouns. Where are you from originally? Where are you doing your service work this year? How does Circle of the Beloved's mission of building kinship across lines of difference connect with justice, becoming beloved community? And then what are your hopes and dreams for when you complete your service year next summer? That's a long list of questions, which I'm happy to unpack that. I don't know if you want to go individually or answer each question, but Megan, Tad, Sha-niece, who would like to go first? Thank you, Sha-niece.
Good morning.
Good morning, Sha-niece.
My name is Sha-niece. My preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. I am from from Georgia. I came from Miami though. My placement site is Boys and Girls Club Jerry Youngles. I am the member and family engagement specialist. So a lot of the work I do is with the parents and trying to come up with events or things to do to brighten the kids' day and also to connect them with not only the site, but also with the parents and staff as well. How do I think? Justice and sort of the love of connecting each other. I think based on what the bishop said,
Yeah,
just like how our program is intentional, a lot of what he is asking of us is to be intentional and questioning. And a lot of times the people who join this program, they are at a point of transition in their life. And considering what's going on with last year, I'm assuming that a lot of parts of the church are also in a transition of figuring out what they can do to make a difference and figuring out if they feel like there needs to be a difference. So I guess the questioning and being intentional is how they're connected.
thank you. And I think intentional ways of asking questions, Sha-niece, maybe that's the beginning for us to enter into reverence for understanding people who are different, who have a different background to our own. I think entering with that sort of reverence and holy curiosity and listening with the ear of your heart is what St. Benedict says. And that's part, I think, of intentional community making, is this commitment to listening to each other across your lines of difference. So I appreciate that, Sha-niece. And yes, I think that's the beginning of building beloved community, which is this call to justice. Thank you.
I'm Kat. I use they, them pronouns. I grew up in the DC area and in Arlington, Virginia. And I'm doing my service work here at St. John's. I am both helping with running the live stream, and I also work with the children, youth, and families as an intern. And not a part of Circle of the Beloved, but I am also helping at St. Mary's with their youth group this year. And I think thinking about justice and Circle of the Beloved for me this year is my process of discernment and thinking about, I was a religious studies major, and so for me, I feel like I really want to go to divinity school and be involved in religious work and ministry, but I'm trying to listen to what the calls of justice are really asking me to do with my future. Is that really going to divinity school? Is it engaging in other ways of meaningful work and connection in ministry? And so trying to think about where this call is guiding me as I try to engage really deeply with justice work. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it for me, is in my process of discernment with Circle of the Beloved, is trying to see where I can be most involved in justice work and how I can have use my gifts to have the greatest impact. And being involved in religion and the Episcopal Church and faith is definitely a really big part of that for me.
Thank you so much, Kat. And it's good, I think, for all of us to continue that discernment work. Who is it that God is calling me to be? Who is it that God has called and gifted me to become? And Sha-niece, forgive me, I forgot to ask, what are your hopes and dreams, for this year of service? So after this year of service, what is your dream, your vision for what you'd like to be and become in the world as a servant leader?
So this is my second year being a part of Circle. I came back after my first year because I felt like I still needed to be here to be able to grow. I see myself still working with youth in some form of way, and mostly working with urban youth and in some kind of way. I just see myself being part of, I don't know, a year. I guess just being part of just the machine of just making sure people are able to explore and express themselves, or even just being like how you said, a listening ear. And me being in North Minneapolis has been really helpful because it reminds me a lot of my home, of where I grew up, and it just makes just every time, because every place inside I've been, I have been in areas that were in need. So I know like that's where I want to continue to work in. Like no part of it, even when it's hard and when it's tough, I still want to be in the middle of that part.
Thank you, Sha-niece. And we'll move to Megan.
Yeah. So my name is Megan. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm from Minnesota, born in St. Paul, raised in Forest Lake. I've lived in Minneapolis since attending the University of Minnesota. Excuse me. This year I'm working at St. Nicholas in Richfield, which has been really lovely. I'm doing a lot of, it's a very vague term, but like community building work. I'm doing a lot of organizing community events and organizing resources for different congregants who maybe need funds or mentorship, and yeah, just connecting people across the Twin Cities who need help. That's been really wonderful so far. I think that justice is like an inherent part of service work. I think that yeah, just in the past several years, I've become even more aware of how critical service work and community building is in my own life. It means so much to me to be rooted and connected to where I am and to the people I'm around, and to feel like I am actively contributing to bettering my community and the lives of those around me. And yeah, every time I have engaged in service work, volunteering, mutual aid in the past couple of years, whether it's here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or in greater Minnesota, it just deepens my love for where I live and the people I have the pleasure of interacting with. And yeah, I can already tell, even though we've only been going for like a month, that Circle has been just a great way to continue that work in my own life, in new ways and with new people. And yeah, it's just been so wonderful. And I love that this is even like a conversation that we are having and that we're actively trying to connect these different themes together. So yeah, I think justice is like an inherent part of what we are doing.
Thank you, Megan. And what are your dreams and vision and hopes for after this year of service that you dedicate your life to? What are your dreams for who you are being and becoming as a community organizer?
Yeah. I am actually waiting to hear back from the Peace Corps. All of their programs have been put on pause during the pandemic, and I'm hoping that I will get a clear timeline at some point, because I think I will be sent out at some point next year. And that's just something I've always really wanted to do, is serve in the Peace Corps, and yeah, to serve on like an even greater scale and use other skills that I have.
And any particular place in the world that you hope you're sent to?
Yeah, I'm actually being, I think, vetted for a position in Guatemala. I would be helping to basically be a point of contact between rural farmers and the federal government, because they're trying to implement a more sustainable agricultural practices program. So being able to be like a point of contact and to build trust between those two parties. So
and St. Nicholas is a bilingual community, correct?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the folks who gather at St. Nicholas in Richfield.
Yeah. So at St. Nick's, it's very unique because a lot of, I'd say about half of the congregation is folks who've lived there, you know, most of their lives, attended that church most of their lives. So, you know, it's older white Minnesotans. But also, I think in the past, you know, 5, 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of immigrants, Latino immigrants, who have moved to, you know, South Minneapolis and its suburbs. So a lot of folks have come in and been welcomed into the Episcopal Church, especially because, you know, they're coming in with like really difficult circumstances, maybe really challenging family circumstances, and they've just felt really welcomed at St. Nick's. So about half of the congregation is now, you know, Mexican for the most part, Latino immigrants, and yeah, they do bilingual services. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Sha-niece, correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard from the director that perhaps there was a hope to pursue a degree in education.
Mainly, elementary teacher.
To teach elementary school children. Awesome. We need good teachers, Sha-niece.
Yeah.
Parents and teachers, the sacred vocations of this life. They're most important. So a future teacher in our midst, a future, who knows, Kat, priest, deacon,
Maybe,
bishop.
hopefully.
We don't know, Kat, but the Holy Spirit, she's going to do her work. And then Megan, some sort of community organizing that's connecting people across linguistic lines of difference and social lines of difference and income lines of difference and education lines of difference, which again, I think all three of your expressions of how you're dedicating this year of spiritual and vocational discernment to know, to pray, to live simply, to be present in a community, to be a gifted person with and for others. I think that's a beautiful gift to our cities, but also to the Episcopal Church. So thank you all for sharing who you are and a little bit about what this year of service means to you. Now we're going to pivot and talk a little bit about the relationship St. John the Evangelist has had with Circle of the Beloved. It was a summer. Craig had no money for this program. He was in seminary working 4 jobs to get himself through seminary, but also on fire with the Holy Spirit to midwife the inaugural chapter of the Episcopal Service Corps in North Minneapolis, Circle of the Beloved. And Jared Weber Johnson, our rector, hosted in his home a dinner, and he invited members of this church to come to listen to what this vision was of building kinship across lines of difference in partnership with young adults in North Minneapolis. And the group that gathered that evening was so generous. They gave so generously that we were financially stable. And St. John's actually became our financial guarantor. Jared actually served as our treasurer in that first year. Now, Jared, we love Jared. Jared is a marvelous rector. As a treasurer, you know, he was good, but we are all gifted in different ways. And sometimes those balance sheets didn't quite add up, but that was the early days. Now we have a fabulous treasurer from St. John's in Linden Hills, Kathy Schweikart. But it was from that gathering in Jared's living room that this church began to turn up. When we were painting and scrubbing and cleaning that old Liberty House that you live in today, that beautiful 100-year-old house, which needs a lot of TLC, it was members of this church that rolled up their sleeves and turned up to scrub and polish and paint and clean. It was this church that turned up both with their time and their presence and their skill, but also with their money to support this vision of kinship across lines of difference. And in many ways, St. John's, as a priest, this is not personal. This was, yes, my vocation when I was coming through seminary, but I really wanted this to be a gift for the Episcopal Church. When all of the truths that have always been there were actually revealed by the apocalypse that was the murder of George Floyd. When that happened, and all of us started to see these truths with new eyes, truths that have always been there. It was finally the affirmation, being a priest in this church, that I fully believe a predominantly white, affluent, highly educated church here in Cathedral Hill, St. Paul, can partner with young adults in North Minneapolis, some on the margins of institutionalized religion, some deeply entrenched in the institution of religion, and everything in between, that we could come together to build kinship across lines of difference, which is justice, which is the beloved community. So I will remain eternally grateful to the people of St. John the Evangelist who have turned up over the last 5 years to support our mission of kinship across lines of difference. And in a very particular way, it has actually grown. Does everyone remember Abby Mitchell last year? Anyone remember Abby Mitchell? Maybe not. Some who, yes, Sha-niece, you remember Abby Mitchell because you lived with Abby Mitchell. But maybe Mark, as a parent, you maybe got an email or two, or maybe your children actually acted in the Christmas pageant that Abby Mitchell produced, or submitted one of the Stations of the Cross for the Stations of the Cross video that Abby produced. Abby Mitchell was the very first young adult that St. John's invested in as a fellow, as a Circle of the Beloved fellow at this church to support children, youth, and family ministries, which Abby was a gift right on time because Katie Matson, our director of children, youth, and family ministry, had to go on maternity leave. And it was Abby Mitchell who carried the children, youth, and family ministries through that maternity leave. And Abby, even though we were in a time of pandemic, drew a lot of our families into the story of Circle of the Beloved simply by being present here and offering her gifts and being present to the children and the youth and their parents. So Abby was the first. And now we have Pat Lewis here at St. John's doing both children, youth, and family ministries, but now what I call essential work for the church, which is live stream liturgy. But Kat's gifts of being able to meet people where they are virtually online through our YouTube, through vMix is this platform that brings what's happening in the sanctuary into people's homes. And that's essential for us as members of St. John's to gather for corporate worship, whether we're at home, whether we're here in the building, or somewhere in between, or maybe it's 2 or 3 days after when you watch the recording of the service or of the sermon. So St. John's is growing in relationship with Circle of the Beloved's program through our Circle Fellowship, but also, again, it's through what you're going to hear in the sermon. Folks becoming adopted family to one another with our young adults who are becoming chosen family to each other and to those that they love and serve in their work placements and in their neighborhood. That we start to choose fathers and mothers and aunties and uncles and cousins and brothers and sisters who are not blood relations, but they're turning up as if they were a mother or father or sister or brother or cousin or auntie or child, that you adopt each other as beloved community. And I believe that that is what God is the image of. The Holy Trinity is the image of right relationship, of chosen family that love and serve one another. And we are made in that image of right relationship and beloved community. So I have a question then. Those who are gathered on Zoom, I hope we haven't left anyone out there, and those gathered in the room, reflecting on what you've heard from our young adults, reflecting on what I've shared about the history of Circle of the Beloved and the history of the relationship between St. John's and Circle of the Beloved. My question to you is, could you share your own thoughts about how following the way of Jesus, following the way of love, connects with justice, becoming the beloved community? So I open this up to the floor. If you have any reflections to share, I'd love for you to share them.
I'll go. To me, Megan really hit the nail on the head with saying that justice is a part of a bigger picture. And so I would say that holding justice primary is not a good, in itself, is not a good goal for a Christian, as we're called to, adopted into the beloved community. It's saying, what does that mean? And we've kind of not explored that, except last year, the way of love really is an exploration of what it is to be a beloved community. And there's a lot of pain, a lot of inconveniences, a lot of learning, continuous discernment about where to be. And so justice is a fruit of the beloved community, not a goal.
Mm.
And so if we're not living in the beloved community, we're not going to have the fruit of justice showing. And the other part of it that I appreciate about this dialogue, but it really comes to mind, is what you've said is good, except we've had little opportunity to share each other's stories and actually become connected. And I would hope over time there's some change, not only with these young people, but the larger community that is different from us, to actually be involved, where we hear stories, understand lives, and can become part of that, integrated into that.
Yes. Please go ahead, John.
I would add, and when you said be part of it, be transformed by that. I mean, those of us at our age who grew up in a very different society and culture where everything was hierarchical and separate, I just feel so in awe listening to the work that you are doing as young adults, which would just never have been really in my consciousness at all at that age. Rather, it was getting ahead, establishing a career, going out, and hearing about this opportunity and seeing what it means in the larger picture, and seeing how perhaps it can involve all of us, is just very, very inspiring. And I hope I can find a way or a means of being part of that.
Thank you, Brad. Yes, Jan.
Thank you. I thought pursuit of justice when I was about your age was to go to law school. Phil and I are both lifelong Episcopalians, and it never occurred to me on the surface or cognitively that I should pursue. Actually, I've had the thought I should have gone to seminary. I just somehow, the way we were trained in Sunday school, the way just the whole image of the Episcopal Church
it just didn't occur to me that this was the place to start, not go to law school. And I felt like I was able to serve in a very, very meaningful way and do justice. I retired fairly recently, old as I am, it's true. And I have been discerning for myself what I wanted to do next. I have lots of interests. I thought, wow, now I've got choice time. And I keep coming back to the church. It's at my very center. And to me, Jesus represents justice. His deeds, his way of life, his all of what he tolerated, all of what he continued to pursue in such a meaningful way. And God is love. So that's, to me, is the tie that binds. And it's something I really feel compelled to pursue. And taking courses and being part of book groups and conversation, there's all kinds of opportunities, but it takes a lot to really immerse in the work. And Peace Corps was, wow, that's what I really wanted to do. But then I had a friend actually who joined the Peace Corps when it was beginning, and she was so disappointed because it was, here we are, we've got all the answers. And she saw very wealthy congregations, Catholic congregations actually in Colombia, South America. And it really was very disappointing to her, and she didn't like that experience at all. So now we're being brought together. Our presiding bishop, Curry, is just amazing to me. And so this is a wonderful opportunity, and I'm grateful for it.
Thank you, Jen.
Can I add to what you said a little bit? I didn't mention this, but I actually just recently graduated from McAllister. So I lived close to this neighborhood for the last 4 years. And I noticed with the George Floyd uprising, it was all of these students going to other neighborhoods in Minneapolis to protest and be involved. But aside from demonstrating right outside of the governor's mansion, which is here, there really wasn't a lot of engagement. I mean, we had the National Guard just on Grand and Snelling and all over, but it's very easy to, it can be very easy to live here and not necessarily reach across to other communities just in our own Twin Cities. And what you said about Jesus looking for justice and God is love, I think, you know, a big part of, I feel like for me, why I felt so compelled to continue being in a Christian space and in the Twin Cities is to continue to sort of like walk the way of Jesus and be more connected to the Twin Cities communities as opposed to just the one neighborhood. And I think that connecting St. John's with Circle of the Beloved furthers our relationship, not with this very convenient and safe neighborhood, but it connects and sort of makes us think about how we can show up for all of the neighborhoods in the Twin Cities and how we can further and deepen our relationship with our communities that experience things in the world very, very differently because of various circumstances. And so I think being a part of St. John's, but then also being connected to other communities in the Twin Cities is so important. And it's a great way to further the work and be immersed in that.
And that's, you know, we study the Way of Love curriculum, which is those 7 love practices: turn, learn, pray, worship, bless, go, rest. And it's the go that I think a lot of Episcopalians over the centuries have been really reticent. We kind of stick in our own little enclave, our little silo. But I think, Kat, you're right. We really do need to go. We need to go. We have to cross the river sometimes. And as you've crossed the river today from North Minneapolis to bring this word, tell your stories, and that we can listen to those stories. And like Roger is saying, these opportunities to start breaking down these systems of apartheid these systems that separate us and make us suspicious of one another, that we can break down those walls that divide us, that we can be part of crossing over, going into neighborhoods and being a source of love and light, salt, to flavor conversations with folks who may never have encountered someone who lives at 1830 James Avenue North, or has never encountered a person who comes to church at 60 Kent Street, St. Paul. And that, yes, this is the work of Jesus. Jesus was on the move. I mean, you just track where Jesus was walking, talking, preaching. He was on a journey, always. So I think it's connected with the way of Jesus, to go into places that are different.
And bring those conversations of differences to these neighborhoods as well.
Yes.
Not just protesting and getting tear gassed in low income neighborhoods in Minneapolis, but bring those conversations of class and police brutality here to our neighbors.
Thank you. We're at 9:45. We have about 6 more minutes. So please, yes, Mark.
Maybe along similar lines to what's just been expressed. If the question is what impedes justice in the world, there are lots of ways, of course, to address that question. But one that occurs to me that where I think the church comes in and where I think the way of love comes in concerns what you could think of as a certain smallness within that drives a great deal of injustice. That is to say, there's a smallness of heart, of mind, of spirit that keeps one from being open to the other. Right? That makes one fearful of the other, makes one fearful to reach out and go in ways that Episcopalians are not historically, just not necessarily their strong suit. That might arise from something of a similar notion of smallness, just a worry or a fear about being open, putting oneself out there in engaging with the other. But that smallness, to my mind, really manifests itself concerning resources, right? It's the idea that whatever resources I have accumulated, if one is too small in one's spirit and mind and heart, I think one fears losing those resources, right? That there won't be enough. And to be moved by the Spirit, to be inspired by the work of God in the world, is to, among many other things, not be fearful in these regards. It is to understand that smallness is not what God wants for us, and that an openness to the other, in addition to bringing so much life to us, also releases us from these obsessions about these things that we think will keep us safe, these things we think of as God.
Yes.
Right? That they will provide security.
Yes.
That they will provide life.
Yes.
Getting out of that mindset is one of the deepest challenges, I think, that we all face, and where the church and the way of love, the way of Christ more broadly, has extremely important work to do. So much of it starts within.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. Coming to a sermon near you in about 30 minutes. So thank you for saying that. I wish you were preaching today, because that's much more eloquent than what you're going to hear. But that's exactly what I meant when you hear it this morning.
I would just expand on that a little bit. Part of that is a feeling that the concept of scarcity is what drives things, as opposed to the abundance, and you just eat that in so many places, and it's fear and of change, and it's really what just puts a crimp in so much of what we think and do. It's that we need to get out of that way of thinking.
We have about 3 more minutes, and I did have another question for our young adults, which we might not have time to answer fully, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Could you share what you believe 20-somethings are most passionate about today, and what you would love to see the church do as we strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being.
In 3 minutes.
So if you can do that in a minute each, then we'd love to hear that. And if you don't have a response in a minute, that's all good. This is a place of grace. But if you have something on your heart, do share it to round out our conversation.
I think one thing that comes to mind is thinking beyond traditional systems and institutions. And so I think that's part of what I've been thinking a lot about with my discernment is I grew up in the Episcopal Church. My grandfather is a priest, and so it's always felt very welcoming and very much like home for me. But how does the Episcopal Church sort of reinforce certain systems or reinforce this sort of institution? And is that a net positive, or are there a lot of detriments to that? And so something that I've been thinking about is, thinking about religion and my faith beyond just an institution, and how do we see religion outside of church buildings, and how do we see our faith holistically? How can we bring ministry and worship to all spaces that we are in, but not in sort of like I'm infringing upon this other person's beliefs kind of way, not to, further colonization, but in a way of, trying to just think creatively outside of the bounds of not that all tradition should be thrown out. I think that in many ways I practice religion in a very traditional way, but just thinking creatively about that.
And think of that multiplicity of voices in sort of a contrapuntal conversation. Right?
Exactly.
That the colonizer wanted to just have their own one way of thinking and being, but you're saying, no, we need a multiplicity of voices in this chorus, this polyphony, this contrapuntal way of being.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when it comes to justice and social movements, a lot of them function and should function as ecosystems. There's so many different approaches and methods and ways to seek justice and to be a part of social movements. And so thinking about what does this church and this faith bring to that ecosystem, and what ways are we perhaps not necessarily helping push the movement far enough? How is our institution limiting us from truly seeking liberation for all people?
Pat, I think that's a lovely way for us to end.
Yeah, I think that was all 3 minutes.
So,
sorry,
Sha-niece and Megan, if there's things on your hearts and minds, know that they're in the room with us. Please share them, with folks that you meet with. After the service, please come to our coffee hour. We're also doing a treasure hunt this morning through the building. So as you interact with folks, and I know, Sha-niece, you have to head off back to the Boys and Girls Club, right? So we know that if you need to leave early, that's absolutely fine. But I would like to offer our Collect for Social Justice from the Book of Common Prayer as our closing. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Grant, O God, that your holy and life-giving Spirit may so move every human heart, and especially the hearts of the people of this land, that barriers which divide us may crumble, suspicions disappear, and hatreds cease. That our divisions being healed, we may live in justice and peace through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Thank you all so much for coming. We will see you shortly in worship.